Good evening or morning or whenever this is. It's probably actually, if it's on the East Coast, it's a different day, but hope everybody's well. Not legal advice. Like, subscribe, share, comment, share with pets. Take it to the movies with you. Show it to you. But share it, comment, pass it on. It helps if it's passed on. So please do so. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about Forbes and Brandon Kay. I was annoyed by something I'm not going to disclose, but I was annoyed by something. Somebody happened to post something that corresponded with the topic. So I then looked at it, decided to do a video. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk a little bit about a video of Brandon's that he posted back a while ago, about 3 months ago or so. Before I do that, I'm going to do a couple of jokes, maybe, and I'm going to save the best for last. So that'll be at the end. But um, if there are such good, if there are such a thing as my good jokes, but I will pretend for the sake of this discussion. So, what does a liar do after he dies? He lies still. What's This is really against my own best interest, but we'll go with it. What's the difference between a liar and a lawyer? Nothing, especially if they have an Australian accent. And the only time a politician tells the truth is when he calls another politician a liar. That's where we're going to start off. So I was kind of pissed at Forbes and Brandon and his crew for their 6-month crusade against MMTLP shareholders. I thought it was just a disgraceful lack of humanity, disgusting. I also thought there was a potential financial interest in the owner, which is a foreign owner, integrated, and perhaps the actions and content was created to help the financial interests of the owner, which of course wouldn't be right also. And I know the owner had been accused of interfering with content in the past, so it's a possible. So in essence, in their plan and coordinated hit piece, and they've acknowledged that they had planned this out, and it's called something like the Looney Conspiracy Theory. I think it's named after the Golden State Warrior big man. Brandon Kay, who has refused to testify under penalty of perjury, despite the fact I've asked him multiple times, because he's one of his articles attached to the answer in my Fidelity arbitration basically asserts that he doesn't believe that naked shorts is really a big issue and that the retail traders are really the ones who are feeling it and are delusional in essence. So I went back, saw the video. I think it's called Chatter 399. I really don't know what that is, but I looked at it a couple times. And this publication was done after the first publication of that RAG series done over 3 months ago or so, and was the subject matter of that interview that I watched, which was the video, Chatter 399. And GME was kind of the backstop of this whole discussion, even though the article obviously was related to MMTLP um, in large part. So I kind of evaluated the interview, and I evaluated in terms of how Brandon would be as a witness. And I found the interview and as well as appearance and with appropriate respect, very uninspiring. And after viewing the video twice just to make sure I got the correct interpretation, I realized why Brandon Kukodin is refusing to be deposed. It's quite obvious. I thought a lot of his comments were irrational, and a lot of them were childish. I mean, I was surprised at the level of his analysis. I really thought at times it sounded like a 5-year-old was talking, and I'll kind of indicate that as I go through this. Um, So they took the position basically they don't think naked shorts a big issue. They, of course, they didn't know about and haven't addressed that. I don't think anywhere about why China, India, Thailand, South Korea, et cetera, have acknowledged since then there's a huge short problem. They've stopped the shorting, and it's a big issue. So I don't, and of course, neither Forbes, Integrated, Brandon, or any other of the scumbags there have addressed that. I guess that's just made up too. All the countries in the world are just making up these scenarios about that. Um, he did acknowledge that, and again, focusing on GME, which he said he followed closely, and he followed Kitty, etc. He said there really was no evidence, and this kind of was his position. He indicated very vaguely at times that there really was no evidence, um, but he couldn't draw any conclusions from that. Yet he still drew conclusions that there wasn't naked shorting. Hard to follow that if there's no evidence why you would draw a negative conclusion. Um, but that was what he suggested. He did acknowledge that in GameStop at the end there were professionals, not retail, that came in to scoop up profits. So he did acknowledge that. One thing that he acknowledged that I think goes directly, and I put an asterisk next to this one, that goes against directly his position, I think contradicts his position, is inconsistent with Forbes' position, is he admitted that it does happen where a share is lent out more than once and even multiple times. So if that's the case, why is he disputing that naked shorting can't happen? And recall, this is the same guy. So he acknowledges that you can counterfeit shares. That's what he's basically saying that. And if you recall, when he wrote the article, at the same time, Savvy Management was getting nailed by the SEC for naked shorting. And Sorrento Therapeutics, a judge in a court order, found there was naked shorting, yet no reference at that time or at any subsequent time. None. So, if he missed it back then, why not in any of the future reminder hit pieces where you scumbags try to go after people when they're down? Why didn't you reference it there? I didn't understand why that but you certainly acknowledged and admitted that they create counterfeit shares. So now your position about there not being naked shorting seems to be contradictory and contradictory to this particular interview. And I would suggest, because again, you might be the subject of future deposition in some case, that you review all your interviews to make sure that the materials that you put out in the future are not inconsistent with prior interviews you're given, because it might come back to you and bite you in the ass. Not legal advice. Um, you did acknowledge that, and I didn't quite understand what your point was, but it was interesting that you did agree that the official figures of shorts, etc., only reflect the legal. They don't reflect, the ones that were mismarked, the ones that are offshore, the ones that were tokenized, none of that. I didn't see how that helped your position. And again, the fact that the short percentage wouldn't be accurate, I would think it would go against your argument that there weren't naked shorts. But, again, another level of inconsistency. You basically said that the problem was there's a black hole in terms of the information flow, which is exactly what MMTLP and other shareholders are saying. There needs to be more transparency. You didn't seem to ask for any transparency in this interview. You basically said there's a black hole, and because there's a black hole, we have to draw our conclusions by inference, by what happens around outside. And based upon what happens, we can conclude whether there were shenanigans going on. So I didn't understand, you didn't address this, but I didn't understand MMTLP. So what if we don't know exactly what happened, what shenanigans could have possibly occurred? Well, we know as of November 15th, 2022, Fidelity, in writing, ethics department says we can't sell MMTLP shares, but they do. And then we know there's an extraordinary U3 halt, one of very few ever in this century to be undertaken. Yeah, those are kind of shenanigans that might suggest odd things that are going on. At least that's what you were suggesting. If there was some odd actions that go on, well, maybe that might suggest there was stuff to be investigated. You indicated also that, again, black hole, so you really don't know, so you have to kind of guess. But perhaps where the share lending rate, although you didn't talk about share lending itself and how lucrative it is to brokers and why they might undertake illegal activities to generate those revenues. But you suggested that if the borrow rate was high enough, that might suggest there was um, a little bit of naked shorting. And then the interviewer talked about GME and the borrow rate there being excessive, which you didn't dispute. And I know, like, for example, finger motion, the borrow rate was over 200%. So according to you, finger motion must be naked shorted. And that would kind of go against your proposition about the absence of naked shorting. And there's tons of securities that have borrowing rates of an excessive, usurious nature. So according to you, all those suggest naked shorting. So your article that suggests to the contrary makes no sense whatsoever in light of your own interview. You talked about, and again, this was an area where I thought this sounded like you were a 3-year-old, and I apologize to 3-year-olds for because I had a 3-year-old that was pretty sharp. But you indicated that false locates should be easy for regulators, SEC, FINRA, to locate, and they could prosecute. They don't prosecute, so by inference, there must not be a lot of fake locates, or else they would have found them. That's a 2-year-old argument, a 2-year-old circular argument. And we know there's questions about SROs, their activities, who they might favor, conflicts of interest with who they might work with in the future, where if you're a regulator, you may go work with Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan afterwards, and you don't want to ruin that potential employment aspect. So your analysis that because they didn't prosecute, that means there's no fake locates. Honestly, that is a ridiculous argument and nonsensical too. And concerning that somebody at Forbes, that's the level of thought that they have. You also questioned the 21 settlements of Wes. You said that, and again, I found this area really interesting, and I'll get to it in a second because I think you'll find it interesting too. But you questioned the 21 settlements. You said, there's no proof. And then you changed that to there was proof of one or two. And then you kind of, I don't know, murmured to yourself about why he didn't disclose it. You didn't really say why, but he probably had a non-disclosure agreement or a confidentiality agreement. So if you enter in a confidentiality agreement, you can't disclose it. I would think somebody who was in journalism would understand that, but there was no reference of that by you. Again, really a pathetic analysis, I thought. But on top of that, you said you talked about Wes and his lack of disclosure, and you said, how would you know whether those settlements occurred? And you said there was no evidence of it, but in fact, there was evidence because one, you indicated there was evidence of one or two, but there was evidence in that Wes and his firm indicated that there was settlements, and I have not heard anyone dispute the fact that there was settlements. And if in fact what Wes was saying was inaccurate and was a violation of the terms of settlement, somebody would have come forward and disputed that because there would be no reason for them to accept an inaccurate um, reference by Wes. You also indicated that, and again, this was another of those 5-year-old analysis. You said if, basically that if the proof existed, that the SEC and FINRA would have prosecuted, but they didn't. So therefore, circular again, you must suggest that therefore there wasn't proof. Again, a very low level of analysis doesn't make a lot of sense. You talked about Citadel, and when you were questioned about them being fined for mismarking millions of shares long versus short, you got on this a tangent talking about, well, we didn't really know how serious it was, if they suffered damage. Um, we really don't know. But again, so here's an area where, and you did it multiple times. You don't know, so you conclude that there's no proof, but you don't know about naked shorting, and you concluded it doesn't exist. So that's different. So you've taken a different position with regard to naked shorting, despite the fact it's in the public record. Again, Sorrento Therapeutics, Sabby, Overstock. There's numerous, Dole, etc. Numerous and ongoing. But you indicated $7 million for mismarking. Maybe that was a large fine for some company that made $50 billion last year. I think not. Again, I thought the level of answers to really be unsophisticated. You did acknowledge and admit that the system's a revolving door. So you admitted the stuff about that there's that people would do false locates. You indicated about the issue of the revolving door. You indicated about a couple of conclusions about who would prosecute and not prosecute. I thought it was a really sad state of analysis, and everything you said, because you didn't say that nothing existed. So whereas in your publications you indicate that there's basically no naked shorting, no problem, here you kind of like were, well, we really don't know, which in of itself contradicts. But the fact that you acknowledge the counterfeit shorting, I don't understand why you now would dispute. So if at some point in time you would like to go and have your deposition under penalty of perjury taken, happy to do it. I'll do it at no charge to you. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. We could do it on Zoom. It would be a grand old time. I can ask you about these questions and other tapes. I know you agreed, and you begrudgingly you agreed that the market's not clean, so we appreciate that. But the fact that you agree that there's counterfeiting of shares, the fact that your understanding of the system is at such a low level is really concerning. And I talked about filing an action against Forbes, and I'm still considering it. In California, there's an anti-slap statute, which means that if someone makes if uses speech, you can't go after them unless there's certain exceptions. I'm reviewing one particular exception for commercial speech, and we'll see where that goes. Um, Last but not least, I don't know who Forbes is working with, who they're assisting, but there appears to be multiple acts of misconduct. And if in fact there are multiple acts of misconduct and they're working with others, that could be construed as being racketeering. Could be a lot of other things. But I don't know if they're assisting shareholders. I don't know if they're assisting others, and they're putting out these articles to support those financial means. But I think that would be stock manipulation, racketeering. And for anybody who works at Forbes, I think it would be advisable for all people to get individual counsel. In other words, get your own attorney. You shouldn't rely upon your company's attorney, not legal advice, of course. But if I were an employee there, That's what I would do. I would get my own counsel. I would express my concerns about what's going on. Is there criminal misconduct ongoing under the feet of people that are publishing articles for Forbes? Are they a party to that? I don't know. But if I were at Forbes, I'd certainly check it out. And I'd be concerned. I wouldn't sleep tonight, to be honest. I'd be up really late. So that's my take on that video. I'll look at some others, and I might have some other comments about Brandon, but I really was taken aback by his admission about the that you could do multiple locates, like it's no problem. It's no problem. So last but not least, what is the most common digestive order for pathological liars? By the way, you understand why I chose liars as a topic here tonight. So what's the most common digestive disorder for pathological liars? IBS, of course. And last but not least, what is the most common heart defect that pathological liars suffer? And that one, of course, is IFib. Anyway, hope everybody's well. If you have questions, comments, please put them. I will look at them all, even if you disagree with me. If you have questions, I'll answer them, or answer the ones I can answer and provide some decent information. Or I'll let you know that I looked at your comment. I do look at them all. Anyway, everyone, be well, take care, have a great evening, and we'll talk again. And we are on our